Hello, Brian here, and thank you for tuning in to episode 3, part 2 of my recruiting guide series. In part 1, we covered the what is networking, and the why. Why should we network? We also looked a bit into who we should contact and where can we find them, as well as reasons for them to network with us as well. Today, we're going to be getting into the more substantive bits of networking. That is, what kinds of questions should we be asking? What kind of research should we be doing before the coffee chat? As well as what are some things we could do to maintain the relationship after the coffee chat and after that initial conversation. So today is going to be a lot more content packed, so stay tuned for that. But before we dive into that, I'd like to share some resources I've created to help you on your recruiting journey. So as you can see on my YouTube channel, on the homepage, I have 3 separate links: Substack, LinkedIn, and Instagram. If you want to connect over social media, definitely check out my Instagram or LinkedIn. And if you want to look at my content in a less visual format like YouTube and more in a written format like blogs, definitely check my Substack out. On my newsletters, I'll be publishing advice on everything from college to post-college and internships to full-time jobs. So again, very similar to my YouTube, and I'll be publishing every single Friday. On top of my Substack, if you actually check out my videos in the description below, I also include timestamps for my videos so you can check out which topics I cover at a specific time, as well as the bit.ly for the slides. So if you're interested in looking at my content on Google Slides, you could also do that by copying and pasting the bit.ly link. This will give you access to my slides, which will let you see kind of my content in a more visual format alongside my videos. My pinned comments also provide more resources, and if you check them out, you can kind of see a link to my Substack and my slide deck again, as well as some additional professional resources. Right now, I'll be providing links to startups hiring full-time and interns right now. But in the future, I'll be including more and more professional resources that will help you in your recruiting journey. So with that out of the way, let's jump straight into it and get into part 2 of how we could authentically network. And so in today's video, in part 2, we're going to be covering 4 core sections. How should you prepare for networking? Maintaining relationships and contacts after that initial coffee chat, and guidelines and best practices for networking. And so as you may have noticed, we've kind of went through the what, the who, the why, and the where of networking. But one area we didn't quite hit is the how. How should we actually network? And this may actually be the most important section for you, so let's get right into it. When it comes to preparing for networking and for your first coffee chat, the first step is doing your due diligence and your homework. This basically means conducting research on both the company as well as the position and role you're interested in. It also really pays dividends to actually research the individual you're talking to. This can usually be done by simply searching them up on LinkedIn and understanding a bit of their background, profile, and story, so that way it's easier to prep questions ahead of time. I personally recommend reading journals and news articles in order to understand what's going on in the industry, as well as what's going on in the broader space that the company operates in. I'd also check out the company website to get an understanding of what the company is, what they do, and what they're currently doing right now, in terms of initiatives and future projects. In general, you're going to want to avoid questions that can be answered with a yes or a no, and you want to avoid questions that could really be answered with a simple Google search. That's what this research is for, and it will help you prepare for questions that are more in-depth and substantive. And so let's move on to the next section of this video, which is preparing questions. I recommend thinking about what you want to learn and then preparing questions along those lines. Write a list of potential questions before you begin asking them, and of course, know that while you may have built a list of questions that you want to ask, never stick to that particular script. The best conversations are the ones that are spontaneous and organic. So if you ask a question and your coffee chatter responds, definitely feel free to kind of build up on that conversation to learn more about that space. With that being said, here are some examples of questions you may want to ask. First, a description of the job. What are some of the challenges of the job and what's the day-to-day like? What are its responsibilities and goals? And what does a typical day in the life of an XYZ look like? Desirable skills, education, and experience. What kind of skills, education, and experiences is the company and the team looking for? This is where you can kind of delve more into the personal story of the person you're coffee chatting with. How'd they end up in this job? What was their path from school to this team and to this position and company? This is where you can get really personal stories, anecdotes, and experiences that will help you see kind of the actual humans who work in this company and work in this role. You could also ask questions about the work environment and the culture. What is it like working at the firm? Why did they choose that company? Why did they choose that team? culture is really, really important. And, as you may have noticed, a lot of these questions try to get into the more personal side of the individual story. Of course, you could go to a career fair or an information session to kind of get the corporate talking points. You're not really here to learn more about the company. You're here to learn more about what that individual's perspective in working for that company is. There's a bit of a nuance there, but the difference is really key. The difference being is that coffee chats at the end of the day, when done authentically, are genuine, heartfelt, and very intimate. You're trying to get at these personal stories and these anecdotes because they provide rich insights and experiences you simply cannot get in an information session and a career fair. So by asking these kinds of questions, you could get at these deep human insights and get a much stronger understanding of the job and the role and your potential fit in it. So now that you know what kind of questions to ask, the next step is to actually request a coffee chat. And so right now, I'll be going over 2 templates you could use when contacting recruiters as well as alumni. Over here, we have a first template that you could use for recruiters. Both templates will generally try to stay under 300 characters because that's the word and character limit for a LinkedIn connection request. You may notice that the language here for recruiters is slightly different from a language you would use when contacting an alumni for a coffee chat. And of course, for this section, you could replace the alumni with another individual who may not be an alumni, but is still someone you'd want to talk to, even if you don't share a college or an alma mater. And in general, when you're introducing yourself for a coffee chat, you don't have to worry about providing all your detail and all the information on why you want to talk to them. I know it could be quite tempting, but at the end of the day, LinkedIn does have a very strict word character limit, and therefore you want to use your words as concisely and sparingly as possible. So perfect. We've gone through the who, the what, the where, the why, and the how. But there's still something missing. We've been focusing on how to network both before the coffee chat as well as during the coffee chat. But what's most important is actually maintaining your relationship after that initial coffee chat. So how can we best maintain our relationships and maintain that friendship and a possible mentorship with these amazing people? And so at this point in the video, we're going to be going over to my Google spreadsheet, which is something I use to maintain my contacts and basically manage my relationships with them. So you can see that I put today's date. That'll actually be quite important in the future, and I'll also attach a link to this spreadsheet in the comments below. So you can see below that I have junior contacts, senior contacts, and executive contacts. I branch my connections and network requests by seniority. You may also have noticed that I have different columns ranging from last name and first name to the school, company, and title they hold, as well as basic contact information. What separates this spreadsheet from others is the last 2 columns, I and J. In I, we have last contacted, and in J, we have months since last contact. So you may notice over here, I've last contacted myself on May 12th of 2020. This translates to around a month ago that I've last contacted myself. Now, obviously, that's not a great example, but what may be better is Angelica. I last contacted Angelica last year on June 1st. And this basically means that it's been around 12 months or a year since I've last contacted her. You may also notice that in column J, there are 2 separate colors. There's one that's white for the 1-month mark, and there's one that's red for the 12-month mark. You may also notice that when I input 2, it stays white, but if I input 7, it turns red, and 10, it turns red as well. That's because I conditionally formatted these cells to be red if I inputted a value greater than 6. This indicates that if it's been 6 or more months since I've last contacted that individual, their information will flag as red, and that'll be a good sign that maybe I should contact them and maintain our relationship. So let's say that I contacted Angelica today on June 9th, and that means it's been 0 months since last contact, it turns white, and it's all good. So how exactly did I do this? Well, if you go to Format and click on Conditional Formatting, you'll notice that I can apply specific conditional formatting clauses to a range of values and texts. In this case, I applied it to column J, and I formatted the cells to be red if greater than 6. This is a convenient tool to basically help you manage your contacts, and when their names flag up as red, that's a good sign for you to perhaps contact them and update them on your accomplishments, goals, achievements, and professional and academic milestones. If some of these individuals are your mentors, I definitely recommend keeping up with them. Maintaining your relationship is really, really important, especially for authentic networking. In part 1, I talked about how networking is a long-term engagement, not just a short-term attraction. And that's really true. And by maintaining your relationship even long after your initial coffee chat, you signal respect and interest in the relationship, friendship, and even mentorship. A lot of coffee chats don't end spectacularly the first time, but that's why you give it a go a second time, a third time, even a fourth time. Because through these repeated encounters, you can get to know your coffee chatter even better, and this will allow you to forge a friendship that you may not have gotten if you had just chatted with them once. And so in this final part of the video, I like to leave you with some best practices to keep in mind, both in and out of your coffee chats. The first one being genuine and being gracious. It's really important during the coffee chat to show your utmost respect by actively listening and learning from your coffee chatter. This basically means sending them a thank you note around 12 to 24 hours after your point of contact. Staying in touch is also really important, and as I've alluded to the point where we talked about maintaining your relationship and maintaining your contacts, this is really important if you want to build a long-term relationship. Who knows? You may actually be working in the near future with your coffee chatter, so it's really important to maintain a relationship, perhaps professionally, but also personally. At the end of your coffee chat, you should always ask for an introduction to a colleague or to a friend in their space. This is really important because you could basically access other points of contact and learn from other people in a similar or identical field, industry, position, or company. And finally, give back. Giving back is really important. And in part 1 of this networking guide, I showed you the many different ways that you could give back to your mentor and to a coffee chatter. Knowing enough about the people you coffee chat will allow you to keep their needs in mind and on the back burner, and so in the future, as you come across resources that may be of use to them, you could be able to point them in the right direction. Meanwhile, there are also some optional best practices to keep in mind. I call them optional mostly because they're just that, optional. And they're optional in the sense that it really depends on the personality and the situation of the individuals you're coffee chatting at a given day or time. For instance, some individuals may be more old-fashioned and traditional. They'll ask you for a resume, and they'll even review your resume during your coffee chat. People on the younger side tend to not ask for resumes, myself included, which is why I say that it's optional. So of course, you could look at my slides to look at this information more in depth and to really take a look at what are some optional best practices and why exactly they are. You could also look at my slides to get more information on the kinds of questions you should ask, as well as the due diligence you should be preparing before your coffee chat. Thank you so much for tuning in to my video, Authentic Networking Part 2. It really means so much to me that you've stayed in this long and are really absorbing this content. And in future videos, I'll be covering resumes and then cover letters. I'll also be going over LinkedIn tips and tricks, as well as acing your interviews. In the future, I also plan to be releasing content on UC Berkeley, my thoughts on it, and my advice for incoming freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and tips and tricks for applying to Haas, UC Berkeley's School of Business. And of course, if you're not seeing any topics that you want to see but I'm not covering, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'd love to cover them any way I can. Thank you so much, and stay tuned for the next episode.